Baton.
Yeah, Baton. There we go. And I think he was pretty accurate as well, because that's what he kind of used his.
Seems to have a high opinion of Baton. In terms of, he tries to take that German strategy. And what was that German strategy, Luke Franco?
Excuse me?
What was the German strategy going into that battle?
It's like kind of use surprise and like just artillery attacks.
Well, I'm talking about at the very beginning. Why select the side of Verdun? Why select, why set it up the way they set it up? Connor.
Meat grinder.
Yeah.
Like to kill a lot of French.
Yeah, meat grinder, the word meat grinder was mentioned quite a bit. Just to create a battlefield where they could just artillery barrage the hell out of them. And I know it's graphic, but that term meat grinder is pretty accurate in terms of forcing the French to just kind of throw men in there for the sake of saving the town of Verdun. Nick Hanley, any other thoughts on that? Summed it up pretty good. All right, thank you. As long as we got Nick Hanley's stamp of approval, I think we're good to go. Charles.
And I just wanted to mention that von Falkenhayn mentioned that, or he just he said that he wanted to bleed France white, and I don't know. I don't really know. Like, was that just like a common phrase back then, or did that just mean he just wanted?
No, that was his terminology. He was saying that mainly to say, just to kind of be as descriptive as possible as far as what he wanted to do. Bleeding white meaning like, get past the point of even like bleeding them red. Like that's how hard he wanted to hit them. And I think it refers to like turning them into marmalade, right? Is the reference at the beginning. Let's see. Other things. Let me ask you this. Even in a battle with such intense artillery fire, he refers to some heroes, one specific hero on the German side of things. Elias, do you remember who that was? He talks about some guy doing this Indiana Jones-like move.
Was it? Wait. I can't remember that. I remember you mentioning something about
Jackson. Help me out.
Was it the guy who went into the French fort and captured all the people who were playing cards?
Yeah, how did he get into the French fort?
Didn't it say that he got a shell exploded near him and he got?
Yeah, he literally got knocked into it by a shell. And what did he do after that?
He went into all the rooms and held all the French people who were playing cards and stuff hostage.
Yeah. Good. Okay. And then I'll bring up one more thing. He talks at the end about the legacy of Verdun. What does he say, DJ, about the legacy of Verdun? Reed, you want to help him out?
I don't remember.
Okay, Reed, is there a specific quote or something that kind of stuck out to you from the podcast? Anything?
Like when he was talking about the gas attacks and all the soldiers, like the quotes from the soldiers.
Okay, so tell me which, is there a specific one?
He was talking about how whenever there's gas thrown in to the front of the trenches, that it would cause a lot of panic, and then soldiers would be ripping off their friends' masks the gas mask to try to save themselves.
Okay.
When it would fall off the beds and try to like get out of the bunker. Or yeah.
Okay. Nick Land, how about you? Quote something that
Yeah, fascinating.
resonated with you.
Like during a gas attack, they'd kind of lose all their training and like humanity, and they'd do whatever they could for themselves. Like even if it meant killing their friends and like soldiers to get their supplies for gas masks.
Well,
They
Reed
just didn't really care about.
brought up that one, Nick Land. Give me something different.
That's the one I mean,
Oh, out of the whole thing, an hour, 10 minutes, you were going to bring up the same thing he brought up.
I seriously, if you had called me before him, I would have said that thing. That's what I was seeing.
I don't know. So you've got nothing else for me?
I mean, hang on, I can look at my. Can I look at my paper?
That's okay. Don't worry about it. Elias, go ahead.
When he was talking about like the horror of the battle, and like he was saying like he didn't know how anyone could withstand it, and then he mentioned how like historians and everyone was just like, it was just how they were brought up, and really like no other generation would be able to stand such horror. It's just the way they were raised that they were able to withstand the battle.
Okay, good point. Ben and Henry, I'm going to give you guys a shot. Go ahead, Ben.
Whenever he was talking about whenever the soldiers left the front lines, like he's talking about like there's certain quotes from soldiers that like they looked like corpses, and like they didn't even care enough to like complain or anything, and they like he said skeletons of companies. I thought that was kind of crazy.
Yeah, he did. The ones who were coming off of the front line. DJ. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, DJ, really quick, and then I'll go.
I remember this quote of like this French soldier, like on the first day when he was making coffee with the two other French soldiers.
Okay.
And I didn't realize that they really liked coffee back then like they did now.
Okay. All right. What was the context for that quote? What was happening?
Like the artillery had just started before they finished the coffee, so it was saying something bad against the Germans for starting it before he finished his coffee.
Okay. Henry Jeffries, one last thought, and then we gotta move on to notes.
When he was saying like some people had to go back twice.
What do you mean?
Like he said, some soldiers had to go back till they're done a second time. Crazy.
Yeah, they served one round and then they had to go back and do another. Okay, I got you. All right. So I know that there's guys that have more thoughts, and I'd love to talk about it, but we've got to move on. Okay, I want to wrap this section of notes up, and really what we're going to go through is the end of World War I. We will not talk about the aftermath of World War I. Okay, so we'll wrap up. We'll talk about the end of the conflict, and really with this second half, we will discuss that. So you guys should see my slide now, or excuse me, my screen now. And I think where we left off, we had gotten through, let's see, Pinotti, where did we leave off? Oh, he's going, where's he going? Notes?
I was getting my notes.
All right.
Trench warfare. I wasn't here on Monday.
Okay. Did you not look at the video?
I was going to because somebody Franco told me last class that I was able to look at it. I didn't even know I could.
Okay, hey, we gotta do that. We gotta be on Johnny on the spot on that stuff. Otherwise, we get caught behind. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Chase Bruce, where did we leave off?
Last thing I have in my notes are talking about submarine U-boats. That's the last thing
Submarine
I have.
U-boats. Okay, so
We were talking about the different
talking about
weapons.
different wartime technologies. I won't have us read this quote because you guys pretty much heard a lot of quotes from Dan Carlin, but I thought this was funny. They put a gas mask on a horse, and it looks like it's not a horse gas mask. It looks like they just put a human gas mask on a horse's nose. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. A few pictures. Did we look at these pictures? You guys are shaking your head. Okay, so machine gun fire. We know about that. There's a picture of those early tanks. These are the early versions of the tanks. You see the machine guns on the side. What do you notice about those machine guns in terms of how effective they're going to be with their fire?
They only have like a 90-degree
Yeah, they
range.
really can only go up and down. They can't turn any way to the right because if they turn to the right, they're going to hit the vessel itself. So these tanks, they're going to be fairly limited. They're not going to be able to do a whole lot. They're going to be able to withstand fire to a certain degree, machine gun fire and all that. But if you get enough weapons firing at that thing, if you get a grenade thrown under it, it's going to be rendered pretty useless. So very often the people piloting these found that they ended up kind of being sitting ducks in the middle of the no man's land. Here's a picture of just a Zeppelin bombing London. It probably wouldn't be this close to the city. These things would be way further up. But again, there's this recognition on the part of the Germans that if we're going to slow down Great Britain, if we're going to slow down the Allied powers, we have to create fear for their populations. So moving on. The battle of the Somme is the next one we're going to talk about. And this is pretty much going on close to the same time as Verdun. In fact, there are going to be aspects of Verdun that end up impacting the Battle of the Somme itself. This is a 1916 battle. And what happens is that the French end up realizing that, hey, the Germans are bombarding Verdun. Excuse me. We have to move troops to that location. And so really what we end up seeing is this is largely, even though there is French help, this is largely between the British and the Germans. And this is going to be mostly a German offensive. So the Germans are going to lead a charge tactic, are going to try to break through the German lines themselves. And they're going to try to get through at what they perceive to be a weaker point in the German lines. They started off with a crazy artillery barrage, and the artillery barrage ends up happening, and it is effective to a certain extent, but what ends up happening is they wait too long between sending their troops and after the artillery barrage has taken place. And why would that be problematic? DJ.
Gives time for the German soldiers to come out of their holes and get into their placements.
Yeah, they're going to have time to uncover their guns. They're going to have time to get the soldiers back in position. And so by the time the British High Command sends the charge, the Germans are ready for them. And it results in pretty much a massacre for several reasons. One, the British, of course, they waited too long. But the other reason being is that a lot of that artillery barrage, even though it was somewhat effective against the trenches, it didn't really hit the barbed wire as much as it needed to. And so when the British try to go across no man's land, they find that they're having to stagger over barbed wire and all sorts of other obstacles, and that they are pretty much stuck in no man's land, vulnerable to to German fire. In the end, we see that the worst day was the first day of the battle. We've got to keep in mind that these battles go on for several months at a time. So this one's from July to November. But on the first day of the battle in July, what happens is the British have 58,000 deaths in one day. 58,000. And I think over the span of the conflict, it ends up equating to something crazy like 128 deaths per second. Okay, in the time that they were fighting, 128 deaths per second. So worst single day loss in British history. And, you know, if the British lagged behind in terms of deaths compared to the French and the Germans, they quickly caught up at this point. So devastating battle for them, didn't work out very well. There's your picture of just the ferocity of the artillery fire, people getting launched up into trees. So the legacy, this is the first battle where we see tanks used. Obviously, they weren't used super effectively. Even with all of this, it ends up essentially, you know, the British took on heavy losses, but the Germans did too, and it was an Allied victory. The British did gain ground, even though they weren't able to break through the lines, they did gain ground. And the Kaiser realizes at this point, hey, we've got to continue making changes, and so they end up firing General von Falkenhayn. Oops. I think what would be helpful is if I get some sort of feedback on your part. If you are done writing the notes, just click the green check button there on the side. That'll tell me who's done and if I can move forward, and because I don't want to move forward before I have to. But if you'd click that green check button, that would be helpful. Reed, you good? Or are you still writing? Okay. Did you hear what I said? Click the green check button if you're ready. All right. How about you, Colin? Where is Colin? Oh, you're good. Okay. All right. So I'll go ahead and clear those. We'll move on to the next slide. So now we're going to talk about kind of a new player in the conflict itself. This is going to be the United States. So finally, we're getting to the point where the United States is somewhat relevant instead of this backwater country that, you know, really couldn't compare to those European powers. And we're really going to see that after the war. But during the war, the U.S. is becoming increasingly relevant. They have fresh troops. They have troops that have been trained, even though they don't officially plan on getting involved. they could get involved. And as we talked about before, what policy had the United States practiced in terms of their foreign policy and involvement in this war?
Isolation.
Isolationism, Connor, and that essentially means what?
You don't get involved in anything
Yeah.
that doesn't concern your own country.
Yeah. So as far as the people in the United States were concerned, that was happening overseas. And really, the United States, we want to sit there and say that they were on the sidelines rooting for the British and the French, and that might be true. But, what do we also know about the United States and its population? Yeah, Ben.
They're immigrants.
Immigrants from where?
Like Italy, Germany, like all across Europe.
Yeah, all across Europe. And there, places like Pennsylvania, actually very heavy German immigrant population. They actually favored, if we were to get on the war, get on the side of the entire state of Pennsylvania, get on the side of the Germans. Now, there are going to be a couple events that happen that even in places like Pennsylvania with the German immigrant population, they are going to end up looking at this and saying, well, maybe not. Maybe if we do get in the war, we should enter on the side of the United States. So let's discuss the first one of those. All right, so the first one is going to be the sinking of this ship called the Lusitania, and you guys have already had that as one of your vocab words, and that wouldn't be a big deal for the Americans, other than the fact that they had a large number of passengers on that ship that were U.S. citizens. The part of that story that we do not hear is that the British were also, in addition to carrying American passengers, they were also carrying over U.S. military equipment to help the British. So the U.S. had been supplying the British with weapons, with ammunition, with war supplies, and this had been, upsetting the Germans for a long period of time. And so essentially the Germans were fed up. They said, okay, unrestricted submarine warfare, if you guys are sending boats up here, whether it's economic purposes, whether it's military purposes, whatever, then you are opening yourself up. You are making yourself vulnerable to be attacked by one of our U-boats. And so they sink this British ship, the Lusitania, and it kills these American citizens. And this kind of ratchets up tensions a little bit between the United States and Germany. Now, the next thing is going to be kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back, and that's going to be this Zimmerman telegraph. And those of you guys have heard about this, know what this is, but it is essentially the British intercept this telegraph, and it's actually the telegraph itself is named after the British foreign minister. I forget his first name, last name obviously Zimmerman, but he's going to announce that they've intercepted this telegraph, that it was meant to go from Germany to Mexico, and that this pretty much puts Germany at quite a bit of fault. And there is debate even to this day amongst historians as to whether this telegram or this telegraph was authentic. The fact of the matter is, however, that the Germans did not deny it, okay? And which is what kind of led the U.S. to believe that it was. But what would be the British motivation for making all of this up?
Get the U.S. in the war.
Yeah, whatever gets the U.S. in the war is fair game, right? Whatever gets the U.S. in the war is fair game. So it's possible it's made up. It's not really known even to this day and time how true that might be. So, but the Telegraph essentially offered Mexico the states of Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico when the war ended. So if Mexico got on the side of the Triple Alliance, they would end up getting those states if Germany ended up winning the war. Colin Pinotti, what is the significance of those specific U.S. states?
They're all they're on right next to Mexico in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, but historically, so geographically that makes them significant, but historically for Mexico, why might they be significant? Matthew.
They used to be Mexican territory.
Yeah, that was their rightful territory from the standpoint of many Mexicans, including the Mexican government. So this could be an opportunity for them to get this territory back, open up a front against the United States, cause these type of problems. So after these two events, the United States has pretty much had it. They're going to get involved. They're going to end up declaring war against Germany and slowly shipping over soldiers to begin fighting against them. So Germany now has a crucial time window. If they're going to win this conflict, they got to do so before when? Ben.
The U.S. joins?
Before U.S. soldiers get mobilized, before they're shipped over, they've got to figure out a way to break through. Ben.
If the U.S. didn't join, do you think Germany would have won?
So I don't think so. I think the war might have gone on longer. Okay, you might be talking about like an 8 or a 10-year war instead of the 4-year war that we have. But because I think, and we'll get into this, but I think that the U.S. troops ended up creating the momentum to break through the German lines when they would end up doing it. It's a good question. It's a good hypothetical. Other questions? All right. Yeah, Nick. No? Okay. So U.S. declares war on Germany in 1917. That's the last bit of it right there. U.S. declares war on Germany in 1917. And they are going to get most of their troops in a little bit after that. So we got 2 more slides to get. If we just get through one, that's okay. We just gotta remember to get that last one. We get that last one maybe when we come back from break. But what Russia is going to do? First of all, Russia. Which side was Russia on Jackson Man?
They were with the Germans, correct, in the Triple Alliance?
Nope.
Uh-oh.
Entente.
Yeah, they're going to be part of that Entente. So, they're the whole reason for this 2-front war. And so, Germany's seeing a window of opportunity, and perhaps this is the time when they do it. If they got to do something between the time Russia withdraws, or maybe do something to compel Russia to withdraw. Well, Russia ends up withdrawing not because of anything Germany does, but because of stuff going on where? Yes, DJ.
Like St. Petersburg or around that area?
Oh, well, just within Russia itself.
Yeah.
There ends up becoming quite a bit of discontent. And we're going to talk more about this next unit because we really can't discuss the Russian Revolution within one slide or, within 2 slides. That needs to be talked about kind of as its own thing because it is a big deal. Okay. And it's defined a lot of what we've experienced over the past 20th century. So the Russian people are unhappy with World War I. There's starvation. There are millions dead. The war has been mismanaged. The generals for Russia are typically pretty awful. They just don't do a very good job. They're not as industrialized as Germany. The soldiers aren't as well trained as the German soldiers. And the Tsar at this point is this guy down here, Tsar Nicholas II. He is going to lose quite a bit of popularity very, very quickly. And a lot of that is his own fault. He's not a very good Tsar. He's pretty indecisive. He doesn't make quick decisions. And a lot of the times he picks the wrong, he has two possible options and he ends up picking the wrong one. So in the end, Russia ends up becoming forced to withdraw, and because the Tsar ends up being overthrown. We have this Bolshevik revolution. What is the primary economic philosophy behind this Bolshevik revolution?
Communism.
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, communism. That the Tsar has and the upper class of Russia has all of this stuff, and you can look at the family there and tell how wealthy they are, and that there are people in Russia living in squalor, especially in this World War I situation. So the Tsar ends up being overthrown, and Russia's forced to withdraw. They sign what's referred to as the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Okay, so even though Russia was just, I mean, Russia's waving the white flag. Withdrawal is not the right word. Surrender is. Okay, they have lost the war against Germany. That's just what's happened. And because of that, they have to sign a treaty to end the war officially. And that's this treaty here. It ends Russia's involvement in the war. This is a huge blow to German national pride. And the Germans end up taking all of that land. Okay, they take all the land that they had pretty much pushed into Russia on, and the whole Eastern Front now is closed. And so what can Germany now do?
Move all its troops to the Western Front.
Yeah, and so this is it. And to get back to your question, I forget who asked it. Would Germany have won? And I think that there is that if they were going to win, then it has to be between the point when Russia withdraws and the United States comes over. Okay, because if they can break through the line, if they can make something work, they've got one final shot. But they've got to do it before the United States comes over between the years of 1917 and 1918. And we are at 10:49. Once you guys get this slide down, you are done. We just got to remember when we get back to get the very last slide down when you guys get back.
Thank you, Coach Walker.
Yeah.
Coach Walker.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. See you.
See you later.
Have a good spring break.
All right, you too.
Thank you.